It was supposed to be just another peaceful Sunday on our family ranch. The sun was out, the horses were grazing, and my daughter, Lily, was out front riding her pony like she's done 100 times before. That's when the shouting started. A voice rang out from the road, loud and sharp, demanding, accusing. It was Karen, the president of our local HOA, storming up the driveway with a phone in one hand and a finger pointed at Lily like she'd committed a crime. Now we live just on the edge of town, and our property is clearly marked. It's been in our family for generations. But that didn't stop Karen from claiming that my daughter was violating HOA rules by riding too close to the fence line. Next thing I know, she's threatening to call the police, saying she has every right to remove trespassers from what she claimed was community land. Except it wasn't. It was ours. Lily came running inside, scared and confused. And while I'm usually the kind of guy who believes in talking things out, what Karen didn't know, what she really should have known, is that I'm not just her neighbor. I'm also the county sheriff. And this wasn't the first time she's harassed folks around here either. There's been whispers for months, complaints about her overreaching, acting like she owns the whole neighborhood. But this time, she crossed a line, so I stepped outside, badge on my hip, and watched as Karen dialed 911. Completely unaware of who she was calling down on us. She wanted an officer to come and drag my daughter off our own land. What she got instead, well, let's just say things didn't go quite how she expected. But what happened next took everyone by surprise, especially when backup arrived. Let's just say this story is far from over. As I walked toward Karen, she was too busy yelling into her phone to even notice me at first. She was giving the dispatcher some wild story about a child on a horse trespassing on HOA property, making it sound like some kind of emergency. I stood there quietly for a moment, arms crossed, listening. She finally looked up, saw me, and froze mid-sentence. Her expression shifted fast from angry to confused, then to something that looked a lot like panic. I stayed calm. That's what years in law enforcement teach you. But inside, I was boiling. Not just because she scared my daughter, but because this wasn't the first time Karen had tried to pull something like this. A few months back, she tried to fine our neighbor, Mr. Thompson, for putting up an American flag on his porch. Then there was the time she threatened to tow someone's car for parking too close to a mailbox in their own driveway. Everyone around here knows she's been pushing limits, hiding behind HOA rules that barely apply out here on the edge of county land. Thing is, our ranch is just outside the HOA boundary. It's private property, legally zoned for livestock and agriculture. That pony, that land, all completely legal and registered. But Karen's never liked that. She's always acted like our ranch was an eyesore compared to the trimmed lawns and gated driveways in her section of the neighborhood. I think she saw us as a threat to her picture-perfect world. And Lily, just doing what kids do, riding her pony in the yard, gave her the excuse she'd been looking for, just as she was trying to figure out what to say to me. I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Backup was on its way, just like she asked for, except the officers pulling up weren't coming to support her. They knew the property, they knew me, and they definitely knew this situation was not what she claimed. But none of us expected what happened when she refused to back down. Even with law enforcement standing right in front of her, the patrol car pulled up slow, kicking up a small cloud of dust as it stopped near the edge of our gravel drive. Out stepped Deputy Morales, a solid guy I've worked with for years. He glanced between Karen and me, then at Lily, who was now peeking out the front window, still holding her riding helmet tight to her chest. Karen immediately rushed over to him, speaking loud and fast, pointing at our property like it was a crime scene. She was trespassing, Karen snapped, her voice shrill. That girl was on HOA-maintained land. I want her removed immediately. I have every right to enforce the rules. Morales gave me a look, half confused, half trying not to laugh. "You're aware this is the sheriff's private land, right, ma'am?" he said calmly. "This area isn't under HOA jurisdiction." Karen didn't blink. "That's incorrect. I've spoken with the board and we all agree that the ranch sits within the visual line of the HOA perimeter. That makes it subject to the standards outlined in the community agreement." I'd heard some twisted logic before, but this was something else. I stepped forward, trying to keep things from escalating. "Karen, you've been told before this land is not part of your HOA. We've got county records that prove it. You can't enforce rules on property you don't control." That's when another layer of the conflict started to show. Turns out, Karen had been telling several neighbors that she was planning to expand the HOA boundary and bring order to the outskirts. I didn't realize how far she'd gone until Mrs. Green, our elderly neighbor across the road, called me later and said Karen had already warned her that her bird feeders were in violation too. Karen wasn't just targeting us. She was on a mission. And now, backed into a corner, she wasn't backing down. Her eyes narrowed and she pulled out a folder from her tote bag stuffed with papers, complaints, even photos she'd taken of our land over the past few weeks. She'd been documenting everything, building some kind of case in her mind. But what was she really after? And how far was she willing to go to get it? Karen flipped open her folder like she was presenting a case in court. Her voice grew sharper as she pulled out photos, grainy zoomed-in shots of Lily riding near the fence, the barn, even our mailbox. She held them up one by one, shaking them for effect like they proved something. "This," she said, "is proof of repeated violations, unsafe animal handling, unsupervised minors, and encroachments on shared sightlines. This land might not officially be HOA yet, but it affects property values. That gives us standing." I looked at Morales. His face said it all. He'd seen complaints like this before: manufactured drama, personal grudges dressed up in legal language. Still, he stayed professional, flipping through a couple of the pages Karen handed him. But then she said something that stopped both of us cold. "I've already sent this file to the HOA legal team," she said. "If the county won't do anything, we'll take civil action. And I'll have CPS look into your daughter's supervision, too." That was it. The moment everything shifted. She wasn't just trying to move fences or nitpick about neighborhood rules anymore. She was threatening my family, crossing a line that no one should ever cross. I stepped forward, slower this time, my tone calm but firm. "You need to think very carefully about the next thing you say," I told her. "Because this isn't about fences or horses anymore." But Karen wasn't done. She doubled down, saying she'd been in touch with other HOA board members and was documenting a pattern of neglect. She claimed she had witnesses, complaints, even hinted that she had drone footage, which, if true, would be a whole other legal problem for her. Just then, another patrol unit pulled up. This time, it was Sergeant Hale, older guy, quiet type, but one who didn't mess around. When he stepped out, I saw Karen's confidence falter just a bit. She hadn't expected this many deputies. And she definitely hadn't expected the neighbors to start gathering near the edge of the road, watching the whole thing unfold. But the question now was, how far was she willing to push this? And what would happen if someone finally pushed back? As more neighbors began gathering near the fence line, the tension thickened. Karen stood her ground, arms crossed, folder still clutched to her chest like it was a badge of authority. Sergeant Hale stepped up beside Morales, quietly assessing the scene, then walked over to speak with me. But before he could say much, Karen raised her voice again, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you all think you're going to intimidate me, you're wrong. I've already contacted a private investigator, and I filed a preliminary complaint with the county zoning board." That got my attention. Not because I was worried, but because it meant she wasn't acting alone. Someone was feeding her information, or worse, encouraging her. And then, like clockwork, a black SUV pulled up across the road. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a leather briefcase. He looked out of place on a dusty ranch road. Karen waved him over like she'd been waiting for him. "This is Mr. Denton," she said with a smug smile. "He's the HOA's legal consultant. He's here to assess the situation and gather documentation for our official complaint." Now, this was something new. Most HOA disputes never go this far, bringing in a lawyer, uninvited, onto private property. That was a whole other level. Morale stepped between them and the ranch gate. "Sir, this is private land. You're not authorized to be here," he said firmly. Denton didn't argue, but he didn't leave either. He just stood there, quietly observing and jotting something. Down, meanwhile, the crowd along the fence was growing. Some neighbors were filming, others whispering among themselves. And then another unexpected twist. Mrs. Green, the sweet older lady across the road, stepped forward with a folder of her own. "I wasn't going to say anything," she said, her voice steady. "But Karen's been threatening me too. Told me if I didn't support her plan, she'd report me for having too many pets." Suddenly, it wasn't just about my ranch anymore. More voices began to speak. "You